On the police interview that was conducted, and we know without legal guardian present or without Martin Bryant's lawyer John Avery present, a lot of people raised the notion right at the end of that interview. Martin Bryant says, "I hope you find the person responsible for all this," and then points to himself and mouths me. What's your understanding of what Martin admitted to in that interview?
Nothing.
You know,
It's mind games. It's a pantomime. The whole thing is a pantomime. Everything we think is true is not.
Welcome to the Wasp Files. Some of this material may be distressing and viewer discretion is advised. I wanted to go back to the Broad Arrow Cafe. We mentioned before that it took something like 6 hours before the police were there, and by Wendy's own testimony and many others, that was a crime scene that was not secured, and she said that people were wandering in and out, people coming in to try and find their deceased loved ones, people souveniring bullet casings on the floor.
I doubt if many people would be souvenir bullet cases, because they'd walk in and they'd be totally shocked and horrified. But some were going in, they needed say the wife's handbag to get the keys for the car, or to get something else, and you can't touch that. And that brings me on to another thing. There was at least 2 witnesses who stated that they recognised the bag that the gunman left behind, the Prince sports bag, and they looked into it, and they saw some clothing and some rope, but no knife. No knife.
This is interesting because Damien Bugg, who was the prosecutor, when he was reading out,
said that there was a knife in the bag and that it had David Martin's blood in it.
So David Martin, who was the owner of Seascape Cottage, who was apparently shot and knifed, and that this combat knife was found supposedly in the shooter's bag with, I believe Damien Bugg had said, with blood consistent with that of David Martin, the owner of Seascape Cottage.
Isn't that nice of him to say only consistent? No DNA proof whatsoever. Then you get on to the next one. If you go back to Sergeant McCarthy, where Martin Bryant's talking about he's got this big knife, when he gets in the helicopter, he doesn't need the firearms because he's got this big knife. But if Martin Bryant's got this big knife during the siege of Seascape Cottage, what's it doing in his Prince sports bag?
That's a good question.
Right? Damien Bugg is pulling one of his lovely little tricks.
There were some discrepancies with a lot of his what would you call it, his brief on the circumstances of the shooting, including some of the timing of the events, of how long it took for the shooting to take place.
Well, they had to do that, and they got it done because of the locked fire exit doors. What they were doing was reducing the time, ergo, so that less people would have the opportunity to flee through that supposed locked fire exit door.
Yeah, I think he'd mentioned that the shooting inside the Broad Arrow Cafe took place in 90 seconds, but other witnesses were saying it was more like 2 minutes.
Sandra Vandermeer stated a minimum of 5 minutes.
Tell us about what Wendy Skua did immediately after becoming aware that there was a problem at Broad Arrow Cafe.
Well, as I said, Wendy was inside the information centre, eating some chips. They heard the noise, and it's going on for a while, so they wondered what it is. She gets up, goes outside to investigate, realises there's shootings going on, does a quick U-turn back into the information centre, grabs the telephone, starts and calls the emergency number, calls the police. Brett Smith, was he the sergeant?
I think it was Sergeant Brett Smith, yeah, and he was on the phone.
She got hold of a young constable, and so she's trying to tell him that the shooting's going on, and he's not believing it too well. So she grabs the phone, and the thing goes to the door, holds it outside the door, so you can hear the shooting sounds. And so when she finishes that, she comes back inside, and he says, yeah, thank you, ma'am. Wish you luck. And I think it was Brett Smith who said, just after that telephone call, so I think the whole board went wild. So there'd be calls going left, right, and centre. So Wendy Skur, I don't know how long it took her for her friends to inform all the other sites within the Port Arthur site. But then they went out, and another employee, Ashley Law, said when they exited the information centre that the gunman had just come out, and he fired a couple of shots over their heads, so they bolted and ran round the back of the toilets. So that's how she got out. Now, her call was made at 1:32. The first call that the police recognised came from Ian Kingston, the security man there, who was, he had done a 4-minute mile. His telephone call was placed at 1:35. So the shooting started at 1:32, and again, Major Sandra van der Peer, who was hiding under a table in the gift shop, she said the shootings went on for at least 5 minutes.
Inside the Broad Arrow Cafe, and we know that Wendy, amongst others, had been rendering, under most extreme circumstances, as much assistance as they could. And there was also some reports apparently about shotgun pellets or discharge of pellets. So what's your understanding about the notion of the ballistics in regards to...
Again, we refer back to the fire exit door. Certainly Damien Monk decides we've got to eliminate the number of firearms used and how many shots were fired, so as to reduce the time span down to, 19 seconds or whatever?
90 seconds.
Right. So you have a look. Who's the gentleman?
Peter Croswell.
Peter Croswell states that, when the shooting started, he was with two lady visitors from the mainland, and he got them on the table. He said he was struck with shrapnel. But Peter Croswell states quite emphatically that he also had a pellet wound on the top of his skull. He was hit in the head with a pellet. And then there's a doctor who came out on the Monday morning and told the news things that wherever we looked, we found pellets.
Was that Dr. Wilkinson?
I think it was Dr. Wilkinson.
Also, Stephen Howard had quoted in his interview that when he was outside the Broad Arrow Cafe, he came across a gentleman who was seated on the ground, wounded.
That's Olsen.
And Olsen had clearly had the pellet damage. And Stephen used to own a shotgun, so he knew the difference between. He also used to own a .223 caliber rifle, so he knew the difference between a rifle and also shotgun injuries. And yet, the ballistics report that was released by Gerard Dutton, who was the Tasmanian police ballistics expert, who was brought in to conduct the ballistics examination of the Port Arthur Massacre, there was no mention of a shotgun being discharged, even though the Daewoo semi-automatic shotgun was located in the boot of the abandoned Volvo when it was left at the toll booth.
Again, if you have a look at Gerard Dutton's police statement, I think it's 162, where it talks about Peter Croswell, the doctor says a pellet, and Dutton writes it down as shrapnel. You've got the doctor's report there, and immediately underneath it, Dutton writes shrapnel. Dutton is so much of an expert, he cannot differentiate between a pellet and shrapnel.
So for anyone that may be a little uneducated, shotgun pellets are round lead balls, Shrapnel, which can, of course, be ejected once rifle rounds strike various things, can shred copper casings
Mostly
and so on.
the copper full metal jacket type rounds of the copper that becomes the shrapnel most of the time.
So you can have little bits of metal that, and there was reports that there was shrapnel damage that was caused by rounds, in some cases, going through the bodies of some victims and into other victims, or shredding and creating shrapnel. But there was basically a lot of reports, including a statutory declaration, which I have from Gerard Dutton, the ballistics report, mentioning that there was shotgun pellet damage, and yet we have this discrepancy. So once again, there's a shotgun that was found in the boot of the Volvo, but it seems like we don't seem to have any shotgun that's been discharged.
And now you understand completely why the DPP, Damien Bugg, got his 30% pay rise.
If anyone wants to read the transcripts, they have to make their own minds up, but there does seem to be, in essence, some omissions, some very, very vital omissions of information, or at least questions that remain unanswered. I don't know whether when the Daewoo was discovered in the boot of the Volvo, whether there were any tests carried out on whether it had been fired. Another interesting one, which I haven't heard anything about, is whether, usually to determine whether somebody had fired a weapon, they use a paraffin test to determine whether they've got gunpowder residue
on their wrists or whatever. Yeah.
And I certainly haven't seen anything that suggests that Martin Bryant had undertaken a paraffin test. Whether back in 1996 they did that test.
They did have them. John Presser, who was a forensic officer in Spring Street with the Victoria Police, he was over in Tasmania at the time, and yes, he was talking about these paraffin tests.
I guess let's talk a little bit about the notion of, considering that there's a possibility that the Port Arthur Massacre was an orchestrated event by higher powers, if you like, shady elements of government and or police. What would be the notion of the historical situation whereby, a lot of people say gun control was the motive for the Port Arthur Massacre? I always say that may have been a bonus, but I think power, money, influence and control tend to be the greedy, the greed motivations.
Darrell Smeaton was the head of the Australasian Police Ministers' Council, very high up within the Australian Federal Attorney General's Department. He held a meeting with the Australasian, which includes New Zealand, police ministers in November 1995, where he handed out the new gun laws that they wished to be implemented. November 1995. Right, now when did Roland Brown make his first prediction of the gun massacre in Tasmania?
1995.
Right, when Darrell Smeaton issued out. Now, the Queensland Police Minister then issued out certain copies of the gun laws to various gun clubs and gun retailers and that, to get their opinion on it, of what they thought of these new regulations. And the Victoria Police, I don't know his name, I think Cooper was the Queensland Police Minister, but the Victorian also was issued with a copy of these new gun laws, and he was to report back in May.
These were the proposed
These were the proposed federal gun laws that were constitutionally illegal, that little Johnny Howard presented in May of 1996. Again, in January 1996, I found the letter going back to the United Nations in Geneva, stating that the required gun laws would be implemented in May.
That's astounding. I mean,
So the gun laws didn't come from America, didn't come from Australia, they came from the United Nations.
It's factually based, and anyone who wants to check should know that the United Nations have issued what they call Agenda 2030, which is in essence a blueprint for a new supposedly benevolent way of running the planet. And part of that is total civilian disarmament by 2030.
All right. Have you heard of Samantha Lee?
Yes, she's a Greens.
No, she's not. She was originally a United Nations. I can't remember. She's part of. Then she became a spokesperson for the Coalition for Gun Control. And when we had was it 2003 Monash University shooting by Zing, shortly after that, she and the associate professor Brett Inder made a statement in regard to a shipment of Beretta handguns that was shortly to arrive in Australia. That simply tells you that if that's the case, with the shooting, Zhang was captured alive. One of the students grabbed him from behind. The professor, what's his name? Something Brown, hyphenated Brown, grabbed him from the front and got shot by Zhang, wounded, but they were then held, and Professor Brett Inder came in, and Zhang said to him twice, "It was all I could do. It was all I could do."
So this, as I understand it from memory, was an Asian student who had taken handguns into Monash University and opened fire.
No, a handgun.
A handgun.
But the handgun ended up being 4 or 5.
In what sense?
Well, you try shooting 2 handguns at the same time. It looks good on television. The other really interesting thing was that he shot his 2 best mates first. He shot and killed them first. And they were the only ones to die. And then you start going back and you have a look at Charles Whitman from the Texas University shooting. Was it 1966?
Yeah, Texas Tower sniper.
Yeah, and a couple of the others sort of thing. Who's the ones that they shoot first? Their best friends. Who was the one Frank Vicpol tried to shoot first at the Philatelic building? His best mate. So there is this thing where the shooters normally take out very close associates first, and that is part of the thing. You look and say, what's going on here, and it follows a particular modus operandi, which is very interesting.
I did a study on most of the mass shootings, including going back to Charles Whitman, the Texas Tower sniper, to try and find the common denominators, and one of which I discovered with the majority of these shootings was that the shooters, which had some sort of social issues and minor psychological issues, were prescribed some form of antipsychotic or antidepressant medication, and that prior to 1988, there were virtually no mass shootings in America. But from 1988, the prescription of these fairly dangerous antipsychotic and antidepressant medications went up 400%. So when Zhang had committed that shooting with the handgun at the Monash University, there was an article that came out in the news about, once again, his prescription of these very dangerous drugs that initially, when taken, can lead to very reckless, homicidal and suicidal urges amongst very disturbed people. So there's a bit of a question as to Martin himself. If we go back to the Port Arthur Massacre, all of the psych reports which I have and have read relating to Martin Bryant are very nebulous. Some doctors think that he had schizophrenia. Some say that he didn't. Apparently he was on medication for schizophrenia that has a condition that you shouldn't take this medication if you don't have schizophrenia. So his mental state and any kind of medical treatment or prescription of medicines, has to be evaluated, because that obviously can have bearing on somebody's
Fine,
abilities.
fine. Professor Chapman, Simon Chapman, from the Australian Institute of Criminology, he's on the Channel 9 Today Show at 7:30 a.m. What does he say about the shooter at Seascape Cottage? He says this man has a mental condition, but 87% of shooters don't. And he's quite wrong, because the figure 87% for the shooting from the statistics in firearm deaths relate to suicides.
So if you commit suicide, well, you've certainly got some issues.
You've got issues. But, he's also telling us that Martin Bryant had a medical condition. He had schizophrenia. Dr. Ian Sale brought in Asperger's, and Paul Mullins ripped through him. Don't you dare say that.
Paul Mullins' report specifically was commissioned so that he could provide his insights as to whether or not Martin Bryant, who was placed on a guardianship order in 1993 by the Hobart Supreme Court, rendering mentally incapable of managing his affairs, whether or not he was, in essence, culpable and sane enough to stand trial for Port Arthur.
No.
No.
The court has made a decision in 1992 under, Gardner or whatever it was, the solicitor, Waterport, right? The court has made that decision in 1992. Once those conditions are set, they're there until the court has sufficient evidence to override that. The court Hobart Supreme Court has never had a thing to override the findings of the court of 1992. Ergo, Martin Bryant is incapable of handling his own affairs, and also thus requires a guardian or a solicitor to look after his affair on any police interview.
So the interview that was carried out...
So the interview carried out by Warren and Payne on Martin Bryant, I think was July, right? First thing, they failed to take into account the court proceedings. Secondly, what's the first thing Martin Bryant says to them? Oh, does my solicitor know about this? And they say, oh yes, Martin, he knows. Sorry, as soon as Martin Bryant says solicitor, interview stops, the solicitor is called in.
So that transcript of the interview, that was in essence one of the only interviews that I've seen in relation to Martin Bryant speaking to the authorities, was conducted without a legal guardian present and without his lawyer present. And I guess we should talk a little bit about that interview itself, because there was some problems with it.
No, how about the redactions from that interview? How many pages were removed?
65 pages were removed when it was read out in the
court
sentencing hearing.
Now tell me, what actual evidence did Martin Bryant's solicitor, John Avery, present to maintain the innocence of Martin Bryant? All things.
None that I can really see.
No. He read out Professor Paul Mullen's report on Martin Bryant.
So this was the psychological report where Mullen had reached the understanding, or his opinion, that Martin was mentally fit to stand trial for the crimes and wasn't in essence affected.
That's irrelevant if the court order said he requires one.
So we're going back to the notion of whether or not the reports that were submitted by the psychiatrists were, I guess, had validity to be able to then determine that Martin could stand trial and could render a plea of guilty or not guilty in the first instance.
Right. 2 points again. What did John Avery state in his presentation to the Tasmania University Law Institute when he, in about 1997, 98? I think it was 1997.
I think you're going to tell me.
I am. I had to do right by the community. Stop Martin Bryant. He doesn't deserve it. I have to look after the community. Since whenever does any solicitor have to consider society before his client? Thank you.
With regards to the interview that was conducted, so what's your understanding of some of the technical problems that they experienced during that interview?
Perhaps something they just didn't want in there. A friend of mine, a Sydney barrister, Terry Schultz, stated if he watched the full interview when it was on news, and he said the background changed 3 times.
They did state during the interview with Martin that they were having technical difficulties with the recording. There's also quite a lot of responses, particularly from Martin Bryant, that in the transcript are listed as illegible. Which means
especially with the police negotiations. Oh, we don't want him saying that, you know. Oh, shit, we can't have him saying that now. Inaudible. Yes. The other thing you've really got to look at too is that who was the, not a psychiatrist, who's the person who rated Martin Bryant's IQ? Joblin.
What was his name?
Joblin.
Oh, Ian Joblin.
Right. Now, what was Ian Joblin's full-time job?
As far as I know, was psychiatrist.
Prison warder. His full job was he did it part-time. And his office was opposite Paul Mullins.
Was he a registered psychiatrist? Or?
I think so. I think he would have been registered.
Because,
that doesn't matter.
So Ian Joblin did present a psychiatric
What
report.
did Ian Joblin say a couple of years later?
I think you'll just have to tell me rather than asking me questions because we're interviewing yourself.
Right.
So let's go back a little bit.
No. This is quite easy. Ian Joblin simply said, look, I really would like to have another look at Martin because I think I got a few facts wrong. Simple as that.
Just to go back again on the police interview that was conducted, and we know without legal guardian present or without Martin Bryant's lawyer, John Avery, present, and that had a lot of problems. But when you consider the content of that interview, and you can get the full transcript, there are some video segments of that available, but not all of them. But the full transcript is available. What's your understanding of what Martin admitted to in that interview?
Nothing. I couldn't see. He doesn't know. He doesn't know about the Broad Arrow Cafe. He's talking about going down to Roaring Beach for a swim, and I think the police, and not only that, but I think the police said there was a couple of people there that he would have seen. So they've asked people, and Martin Bryant's been seen at Roaring Beach. I think that's interesting. Then you go in and look at the Fortescue Bay Road, and none of that makes sense until you go back to Terry McCarthy and the police negotiators' tapes, where Martin Bryant talks about kidnapping this bloke and with the woman and the child in Fortescue Bay Road.
So just to clarify, did Martin at any point state that he'd been down to Port Arthur on the day?
No. I'm pretty certain he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the transcript, and I guess I'm asking the question, but on multiple occasions, he clearly states that he never went down to Port Arthur, and that the only thing what we're referring to with the Fortescue Bay turnoff, the transcript mentions a confused recollection of him kidnapping somebody, a male, at gunpoint and forcing them into the boot of the BMW, and that person was, there was a woman there with a young child who'd also wanted to take part in the kidnapping, and he said, well, I've got this bloke here, so hop in. So he has a confused recollection of this kidnapping that took place at the Fortescue Bay Road turnoff. and you're saying there is that comment that he made to police negotiator Terry McCarthy.
Yes, and my belief is the police, being very naughty people, have played that to him beforehand and saying, look, there you are, Mutt, that's you, that's your voice, this is what you're telling us. And so when they do the police interview, Martin Bryant reiterates what he has heard from the police negotiator's tape. Because I've said it, it must be true. You understand? But it's all fantasy.
So when people sort of say, we have this interview with the police and that there is a confession, in essence, to the crimes from Martin Bryant, there seems to be some issues with the interview. There is some stopping and starting technically. And once again, him mentioning that he was, on multiple occasions, was never at Port Arthur. So in essence, through the entire interview, and if anyone wants to download that will be available on the files, on the Wasp Files, with the documents that are available. He's never actually admitted to killing anyone. Though there is a lot of people raised the notion right at the end of that interview. Martin Bryant says, "I hope you find the person responsible for all this," and then points to himself and mouths "me." And I think
No. That includes me.
I'm pretty sure he just says "me."
Right, try again. That includes me. Think about it. I hope that people try to find out the person who actually did it. Me. No, that should be, and that includes me.
Yeah, it's as I often say, as damning as that seems, it's still not a confession to murder.
It's not.
Particularly if we consider the notion that Martin thought that he was playing the role of a counter-terrorism Jamie at Seascape, and that he was, the centre of attention, the focus, the person responsible. It doesn't qualify, in my opinion, as a strong enough indicator of a confession to murder. And yet a lot of people pointed out it does seem quite damning. And one of the officers says, "Oh, I don't find that very funny, Martin." And he says, "Oh, well, you should have recorded this." And they say, "Well, it was recording." So on the surface level, it appears like he is taking responsibility for it. But I guess it still remains to be seen whether it qualifies as proof beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes. I don't think it's reasonable. Totally unreasonable. And I'm quite certain when Martin Bryant said me, he would have said, "That includes me," because he would also like to find the people guilty of these murders.
There's a section in the interview where I believe it's Inspector Payne says, "I've just told you what you've done." Martin replies, "What have I done?" He says, "You just killed 35 people." And Martin turns his head away and says something that sounds very similar, like, "Oh, it's bullshit." So it just seems quite interesting to me that someone who had carried out a massacre of that horrific proportion would have a very clear idea of what they'd done when shown images of some of the victims and told that he had killed 35 people. His reaction seems to be quite astonished. So it sort of flies a little bit in the face. He's certainly acting throughout that interview very frivolously, laughing and treating it like it's a big joke.
It is a big joke. Because he doesn't realise the significance of what they're pinning on him.
It's a very unusual interview and certainly one that is worth investigating. I wanted to sort of jump ahead a little bit and talk about the fact that you began the long journey, as I have, into really digging deep into Port Arthur. And how did you find people were responding to you, whether it be former members of the police force or just generally? How did you find the reactions to when you first started voicing your concerns about the tragedy?
I really had virtually nothing to do with any of my former associates in the police force, which is why I'm living in Geelong, because I'd never worked here. So I didn't approach any of them. There's a few people in the police force I know that were extremely interested in my CD when I put it out, and some of the other things I'd come up with later on, because all it simply is just going through the paperwork and putting different things together, timelines and other little things like that. It's not difficult work. It's proper police work, and you get a far better picture of it. So, look, as an example, if you have a look at Gary Whittles and Paul Hyland's and Andrew MacGregor's statement, there's virtually very little time things in there. And the time essence is vital for any police evidence, you understand? So when you suddenly see that the timelines aren't there, you have to ask why. But there is one extremely interesting statement that gives a precise time, and that's from Merrin Craig, who is the girlfriend of Constable Paul Hyland, and she states that she received a telephone call from Seascape at 3:08 p.m. Why did she do that? Because she received a telephone call from Seascape at 3:08 p.m. Why?
Now, can you elaborate? What was this call? What was she doing at the police station?
Well, she's the partner or whatever of Constable Paul Hyland. So while Paul Hyland is outside saving the world, she's stuck inside, and the telephone rings at 3:08.
So was she like the receptionist at the police station?
Yes. Just like you go to any one-man police station, he's always got a wife there, and she used to look after the police station while he's out doing the rounds or doing this or doing that. So she's there to answer the calls and take messages and things like that. So why? And I'm just going to put that one to you, because once you go ahead and do a timeline on Gary Whittle's statement, so he's got to drive from the Nabinas police station down to the toll gate at the toll booth at the Port Arthur site, see the sites there, collect names, addresses, get a bit of a rough statement. He then drives down and sees, what's his name, Laycock, Jim Laycock. If he's there, so he's talking that's what, 5-10 minutes? Then he goes down across the road where we've got the Toyota with Zoe Hall, who's been shot dead in that, and he's got to talk to a few people. Then he drives further up, and he's being flashed and slowed down by vehicles coming the other way, saying there's a heap of people who have been shot at the Fox and Hounds Hotel. And so he goes in there and he starts interviewing people who have been shot, again collecting names and whatever. All takes time. And then he leaves that, and he drives ahead. All of a sudden, in front of him is Constable Paul Hyland. And then they go on to Seascape Cottage.
And with the call that was made to Merrin Craig, the content of that call was quite distressing.
No, it wasn't. It was made up. It's a lie.
I'll elaborate what has been claimed, but then I'd be very interested to see your reaction to that. So she claims that, as you say, 3:08 p.m, somebody rang the police station and was taunting her and saying, "Do you know where your husband is, Paul Hyland? I know where he is. And I'm having a lot of fun here," and so on, and sort of taunting her, and she was quite upset by that. And then he said something pretty distressing like, "Playing with yourself, are you?" and then hung up the phone. So there was a malicious call, in essence, reported that had been made to Merrin Craig by somebody, apparently at Seascape Cottage, supposedly Martin or Jamie. But I guess, tell me why you think that's a lie.
Of all the information you have on Martin Bryant, the police negotiator tapes, the police interview, when was ever Martin Bryant, when was he ever displayed that type of personality for the call that Mary and Craig got? He's a nasty, sadistic, sexualistic animal, and Martin Bryant is none of those. So that call wasn't made by Martin Bryant. So what was the call made? To Mary and Craig from Seascape Cottage at 3:08. There was a call made. What was it? We don't know, do we? But it definitely wasn't what Mary and Craig said. My guess would be somebody rang her up and said, "Here, have Paul come and pick me up." So you go, and as I said, you go and have a look at the timelines of Constable Gary Whittle, and they'll all be correct. You then have a look at the timelines of Paul Hyland, and they're wrong. And then, who does Paul Hyland spend the entire siege at after he leaves Gary Whittle at the front door of Seascape? Sergeant Fogarty.
Sergeant Andrew Fogarty.
Sergeant Andrew Mark Fogarty.
Now, was he Tasmanian Special Operations Group?
Yes, he was also a sergeant at the Bellerive Police Station. So, my belief is that Sergeant Fogarty was at Seascape well and truly before his statement tells us that. And the call from Mayor and Craig is the sole key as to what is actually happening there, because that call would be registered at Telecom, that call went out from Seascape to being a police station at that time. And where was Paul Hyland at that time? Because they didn't get to Seascape Cottage until about 3:30.
What about Pat Allen? So Constable Pat Allen, who was traffic police, I believe.
He was traffic police with was it Perry Caulfield? He dropped Perry. He's a young gung ho policeman. Right?
So he arrived at some point at the entrance to Seascape Cottage and apparently was fired upon, and then had to take cover in a ditch with Gary Whittle.
Yes. So he drives from Hobart with I think it's Perry Caulfield, reaches Highland and Fogarty, where they're overlooking Seascape, and they're told sort of thing there's wounded down at the Fox and Hounds Hotel. So Pat Allen then drops Perry Caulfield off there to look after them, and then drives back to back up Gary Whittle.
And then he's fired upon, and the reports I have seen is that he took cover
in the ditch on the other side of the road. Yeah.
And then the bullets were striking the front bumper of his car, and so he then was pinned down in the ditch with Gary Whittle for a while.
Each thing of being pinned down and fired upon, that's again extremely specific. Pat Allen tells us at one stage he's requested by somebody that the gunman is on the roof, and if they could take a view, so it's possible for them to take the gunman out, right? So he then crawls out of the ditch and using the police car as cover, and lo and behold, somebody from Seascape takes a pot shot. The bullet bounces off the road and into the front bumper bar of Gary Whittle's police car.
So he immediately realises.
Not only can the gunman see him, but how did the gunman know that exact time that he'll be doing that?
That's a very good question, given that he would have been given the directive to engage the shooter at Seascape, and there were police all over the area.
Were there police all over the area?
I guess it was the early stages of the siege, So it's at
So
this stage we've only
who
got.
gave the instruction that, the shooter is on the roof of the building? Can you see him? And then you consider the message that the SOGs heard. We have the Port Arthur government permission to shoot. Permission denied. We have the Port Arthur government inside. Permission to shoot. Permission denied. This must happen. And that comes from the SES, who were manning the barricades around Seascape, who were also listening into the police radio.
I did also hear that there were 2 Australian federal police officers that, once they heard that response over the radio, had resigned in disgust when they heard the call. Permission denied. This must happen.
Stuart Beattie told us that story. He got it from a mate in the Australian Federal Police. Yes.
So yeah, there's I guess we're dancing around a lot of the questions, and these are questions that we would have hoped had been answered, but without.
But look, it's all right. Here again. Who asked Gary Whittle to get up and have a look? There's only 2 possibilities, because they have to be the person in charge. So it's either Sergeant Andrew Mark Fogarty, or it's the policeman inside Seascape Cottage setting Gary Whittle, or setting Pat Allen up, to make sure that he stays under cover. There's only 2 possibilities. Which one do you want?
Well, it's it's certainly
It's mind games, or as my friend Stan says, it's a pantomime. The whole thing is a pantomime. Everything we think is true is not.
So tell me, what was the second yellow Volvo?
That was driven by Jean Andrews and Lynn Beavis. And Paul Cooper tells us that.
So there were reports that there was a second yellow Volvo at Port Arthur, and that it was at the site, and my understanding was people had known that the shooter had driven a yellow Volvo, and they'd spoken to the 2 women and said, be careful driving that car because you might be mistaken.
That's Paul Cooper's statement. Then you have a look at Connie, whatever his name. He's a mate of Stephen Howard. Who actually said when he was driving past Seascape at about 10:30 in the morning, he saw the yellow Volvo at Seascape. The trouble is, Martin Bryant's still at the Fawcett service station drinking his coffee.
So I just want to clarify that, because what we're talking about now is that, in essence, and it could be considered not just a coincidence because there's more than one type of car, but there were 2 yellow Volvos on the day.
And both had a surfboard on top.
Is that been definitely verified?
Michael Coffing. That's what Michael Coffing says in his statement. And he says that the surfboard was in a surfboard bag of a certain colour. When you have a look at the Volvo outside the toll booth, what do you see on the top? You see a yellow surfboard, no bag.
Lupo Prinz had made a report to the Mercury newspaper that the initial target for the shooter was not the Broad Arrow Cafe, but was the ferry. And supposedly he had driven down and tried to park the yellow Volvo down near the water's edge, and remonstrated with Ian Kingston, who was the security manager and traffic controller, who said, you can't park here, we need this place for the buses. And then he walked away. When he looked back, the yellow Volvo had been parked down the water's edge.
Parked back where it is.
And that's where the pier was, that had the ferry, which was the Bundina, which would take tourists over to the Isle of the Dead. So what's your understanding of that notion that the original target was the ferry, and that there was, in essence, a problem with that initial target that ended up meaning that the gunman suddenly chose the Broad Arrow Cafe?
What would you call it? The incident was to be initiated at 1:30. That would allow the doctors who were attending the Royal Hobart Hospital conference, that not to escape from head for the airport, but they could be called back to the Royal Hobart Hospital to start performing emergency surgeries on 90 or so plus American tourists who had arrived in there in 2 buses.
So you were saying that there were US tourists that were due to take the Bundina ferry across to the Isle of the Dead?
Yes.
And that the shooter had parked down there. So why didn't that initial target occur?
Because it had to take place at 1:30. A fortnight prior, the ferry changed its schedule from summertime to wintertime. It would not be leaving at 1:30.
So then the shooter was not able to get onto the ferry, and
so there was an alternate target chosen. Rebecca McKenna will tell us that he was mumbling a lot to himself. I'll say that he had earphones and a throat mic. That's what the long hair was required to hide. Right, so somebody's instructing him what to do and how to do it.
And so he gets, in essence, was not able to get onto the ferry, and if there'd been 80 to 90 US tourists, that would have had pretty catastrophic global ramifications, particularly for the US in relation to gun control. But then has to, I guess, improvise and choose another target. So he makes his way into the Broad Arrow Cafe. And going back to Anthony Nightingale, you're saying that he leaps to his feet when the gunman begins shooting and yells out, "No, no, not here."
Gunman does a pirouette, turns around, shoots him in the throat, and he falls down dead.
Let's have a bit of a chat about Terry Hills. Terry Hills, I've spoken at
He's a lovely man also.
He's now deceased, sadly. Yes. I never got to talk to Terry, but I spoke to his wife, Dorothy, at great length.
Well, when I was listening to that tape from Mike Munro, I couldn't understand the term their main man. So I rang up Terry and I said, "What's he saying?" He said, "Oh, it's their main man." So I went back and listened to it. It was right. And he would talk with you and help you with anything. He was a lovely man.
So you spoke to Terry Hills?
On the phone, yes.
He was the owner of Guns and Ammo and the man that was accused of selling the AR-15 to Martin Bryant. But he denied that vehemently.
And it wasn't on his books. And he kept a very solid record on his books, as most gun dealers do.
I've spoken at great length to Matthew Hill, his son, and he very much confirmed the same thing. He said, my dad didn't need to do under-the-counter deals for money because he had plenty of money. And he said you couldn't buy a box of ammunition without needing to show a license to Terry Hills. So, and speaking with Dorothy as well, his wife, who's now also sadly passed, she, in essence, told me the story of how they were raided by the police and, coerced very, very forcefully into admitting that they'd sold the AR-15 that was used in the Port Arthur Massacre. But Terry denied that up until his death, and they had their licenses, their dealer's licenses, stripped from them.
He could not have sold the AR-15 to Martin Bryant. The AR-15 came from the Victoria Police SOGs, who in about 92, after confiscating, I think it was 17 AR-15s in Victoria, they were replaced by new firearms. So they had the AR-15s and the Ruger Mini 14s, and they sold them to a Bendigo gun dealer by the name of Garnet Featherston. Garnet Featherston then sold the Mini 14s to the Queensland Prison Service. He then made the mistake of trying to sell 3 AR-15s to Victorian gun collectors, who, when they went to take their firearms to be registered, the Victoria Police Gun Register found that these same firearms had previously been registered with them and had been classified as being destroyed at the Sims Metal Furnace in outskirts of Melbourne. Right? And at this particular stage, Inspector Warren came over to visit, and he was meeting with Assistant Commissioner Sinclair, Graham Sinclair, in relation to these firearms and how to clean up the mess. So, where did Garner Featherstone supply to the Tasmania police the firearms that the AR-15s especially that were used at Port Arthur? Because that's where they came from. And the reason I can't prove it is because the Victoria Police also confiscated Garner Featherstone's gun register, because that also would have been extremely accurate.
And Terry Hill's as well. So both the gun registers we know have been seized by police, never seen the light of day, never seen court, and they would, you would imagine, document what firearms went in, what firearms went out, who bought them. Terry Hills had stated quite comprehensively that a blonde-haired male had come in with one of the new plastic licenses that was endorsed for both semi and fully automatic weapons under the name Martin Ryan.
Yes.
But even then, he said the only thing that person had purchased was some shotgun ammunition and I believe a gun belt. But he'd also documented there's the
AR-10.
Yeah, the AR-10, which was handed over the counter by someone. And
it was by the same gentleman. And when Terry Hill picked up the AR-10, he wanted to, what do you call it?
Rack the bolt.
Yeah. And a round pops out.
So it was brought in locked and
It was
loaded.
brought, yes. And Terry Hill says, "Oh dear," which is spelled S-H-I-T. And he put the firearm down and says, "All right, I'll fix it." And he wouldn't give it back to Martin Bryant. He didn't think Martin Bryant was safe with it.
Yes, it was apparently brought in a towel, and the notion that it was brought in like, oh, there's something wrong with his firearm, and the notion was that he was using ammunition that might have caused it to jam. But the fact that he brought in a fully locked and loaded semi-automatic high-powered rifle, and it was, confiscated by Terry Hills, put into his registry, and so that was, kept there, and once again they were raided and their licenses taken, so we don't know what happened to the registers. We don't know what happened with the AR-10 that was handed into him. So, there's that question of the guns. And you mentioned that the AR-15 had come from Victoria. So there was some talk about the farmer.
There'll be at least three.
Yeah, there was more than one.
You see, you've got Martin Bryant's firearm, right? You then have the AR-15 that's found by Gerard Dutton at Seascape, under the ashes. For a building that was burnt down 5 hours ago. And the firearm, most of it, a lot of it plastic, is still in proper working condition, except it's had a load put up it. And so that's the second one. And then you've got the third one, sort of thing that, who's the witness? Doesn't matter. There's another witness who was never near the Seascape, near the Broad Arrow Cafe, who stated that the gunman was going around shooting everybody from the hip. But how did he know that? Because he wasn't inside the cafe to see it. So, there's so much you could really pull apart.
Yeah, look, I've covered a lot of these in episodes of the Wasp Files. We've taken various aspects, the guns, who owned them, where they came from, the discrepancies between the shooter being...
what about the FNFAL?
Well, that was apparently discovered on the roof of the Seascape Cottage after the siege, and it had been damaged. It was missing a carrier spring, which is a vital component of that rifle in order to be able to fire it as a semi-automatic rifle.
They never found that carrier spring, by the way.
No, they didn't, and the barrel was bent, and I've had someone tell me that barrels on FNFALs are very, very tough barrels, and it would take a lot of force to bend a barrel. And as a result, those guns weren't able to have ballistic tests on the chambers. Same with the AR-15, as you mentioned. It was found with an exploded round that had gone off so catastrophically it had melted the rear of the casing into the bolt face and blown out the gases of the magazine tube. So there'd been a catastrophic failure. And anyone firing a gun with that kind of failure would have clear damage to their fingers and
their eye.
Their eyes and face, because when those guns...
when it goes off like that, they used to do that in the Vietnam War.
With hot shots.
Yes, and the idea was that if they found a ammunition case or whatever, rifle, they'd grab the magazine and they'll put a hot shot in about number 3. So
Well, it was C4 or something like that.
no, but they'll put this hot bullet into the magazine, but about 2 or 3, so the shooter would fire up 1 or 2 things, and then he'd cop it, and it would kill the shooter. That's what it was designed for.
They also did that apparently with, if they had to leave behind, howitzers and very high-powered stuff, so anyone using that would blow themselves to pieces. It's a military tactic.
It's been used a long time.
Talking about military tactics, we know that there were aspects of the shooter down at Port Arthur that seemed to suggest a very highly trained individual. Everyone said the person was calm, methodical, wasn't spraying and praying, and as we said, was noted to be dancing, pirouetting, spinning, and yet when people looked at Martin Bryant's so-called proficiencies with firearms, we talked about
how many shots had he fired?
In the cafe. It's
No. Martin Bryant, prior to the Port Arthur Massacre, how many shots from the three different firearms he owned had he actually fired?
I saw a figure of 64, I believe.
Right, he hadn't fired the Daewoo shotgun. That frightened him.
Supposedly, yep.
No, that's what he says. We can take that as being fairly correct. How many rounds had he fired from the AR-15? Because he fired left-handed, and they would go into his chest and burn him. How many? I think the figure's about 17 at the most.
It was 29 because, firstly, the shooter was firing from their right hand, whereas Bryant was left-handed.
No, prior to the Port Arthur Massacre.
Oh, you're talking about his target shooting.
Yes, and all that. Yeah. About 17.
Yeah.
How many had he fired with the AR-10?
Unknown.
Again, not too many. We don't know. So, as a shooter, as a proficient shooter, he's not even a proficient shooter. He can't properly handle a firearm.
Yeah, to bring it in fully locked and loaded, suggests that someone didn't have a great understanding of how to clear a blocked breach. But also, the fact that Martin was left-handed as a shooter and demonstrated that in the video with Inspectors Warren and Payne, but everyone said the shooter shot from their right and shot from the hip.
No, not from the hip. Sergeant Mick Sargent says he actually lifted up to his elbow and aimed it, shot at him.
He did fire from the shoulder, but he did a lot of shooting in the cafe from the hip.
Yes, and do you know why?
Because
all the bodies he was shooting, or most of them, were lying on the ground. He just had to walk up and just go bang. And they'll be headshots.
Yeah, I do agree with that if someone's seated at a chair and you're firing from the hip, you're pretty much at head height. The indications were that the shooting wasn't spray and pray. It was
very concise.
Virtually, close range to point blank in the cafe, which is why most of the victims were taken there.
Oh, again, Robert, I got it mixed up. Peter Croswell. We've got the doctor's report on him with the
pellet damage.
With the pellet, but Rob Elliott, who was shot in the arm, he was the one who had the pellet damage to the head. The doctor pulled a pellet out of his head.
Means there must have been a shotgun fired.
No, it means that he was shot with a shotgun. Now, how does Rob Elliott describe the gun with which he was shot? Big, black, and ugly. Now, what's an AR-15? It's not big, black, and ugly. What's a Daewoo shotgun?
Big, black, and ugly.
Right?
Yeah, I guess the Daewoo shotgun certainly has, in essence, you could describe it as a fat, chunky version of an AR style. It's got a handle on the top, but it's a bulky, fat weapon.
Yes.
Certainly a very ugly-looking thing. The other interesting thing I noticed when the shooting took place at the toll booth, that when Robert Solzman was shot, one of the witnesses, the Cheoks, had reported that his chest had
Caved in.
So if you shoot someone at point blank range with a rifle, like a 223 AR-15, the bullet's likely to go straight through and exit through the back.
Yep.
But to cave in a chest, you're looking at a shotgun. And he did describe the weapon as being an Arnold Schwarzenegger type gun, which suggests a big
black and
ugly looking gun like the Daewoo shotgun, which was found
in the boot of the Volvo.
So I would, hazard a guess as that he was shot with a shotgun if it made his whole chest cave in.
Well, what were the others also shot with it? Because he hasn't gone around to change firearms.
Yeah,
interesting.
It is. It's just, these are questions that we need answers for, which is why we're here. And it's great to just discuss this because you've done us more investigation than just about anybody. And I guess I wanted to talk a little bit more about where to go from here, because you've certainly over the years collated and collected, some very interesting information that a lot of people are not privy to. What's your thoughts on where this is all going, where you're at with it now, at the ripe old age of 78, I believe?
78 next month.
Yeah, so where are you at now, Andrew, with everything?
I'm looking at the Port Arthur. I started off with that. Then, like any good policeman, I then started to look for similar cases and all the lone nut gun massacres. Did you know Melbourne is the lone nut gun shotgun we're the leader in the world, Melbourne?
Yeah, we've had Hoddle Street, Queen Street. There's been some other shootings as well.
There's the East Melbourne Abortion Clinic, and then there's Monash University.
Yep. So we were in some ways the predecessors to Port Arthur Massacre, because Hoddle Street...
Hoddle Street and Queen Street...
took place in the 80s, late 80s.
87. Then we had the one at Strathfield in Sydney, I think, and then New Zealand with David Gray, and then finally at Port Arthur.
So I guess just with your feelings, because I want to just finish off talking about Port Arthur. So you've come through many years of investigation into Port Arthur and been very, very supportive of my efforts and providing information that's certainly a lot of which I haven't seen. So where are you at now? Do you want to pass the baton? Do you want to move on from it, or how?
Well, I'm getting very old and cranky and whatever, and I've got this habit of skipping all over the place, very haphazardly.
But it's been a great journey. I mean, it's you've certainly been pivotal.
I had some really good help from really good friends. Wendy Skur, excellent leader. Stuart Beater, excellent. He knew all about firearms. Stephen Howard helped as much as he could. John Blasky from Tasmania. Ian McNiven from Queensland. Look, there was a lot of support. And
where do you hope? I'll continue with the Wasp Files. Where do you hope it's going to go? Do you think we'll ever reach some kind of understanding of the truth? What's your thoughts, honestly, about whether we'll ever be able to, for instance, get a release of all the hard evidence that's been locked down for 75 years?
You won't get any release of any hard evidence. That they can't afford that. If you consider a Port Arthur Massacre in regard to the JFK shooting, we still don't know the truth about that shooting. I've done a couple of articles on it. I think the second one I did is fast. Well, the first one was rubbish. But what it is all these things are being controlled. The governments have to control it. They haven't well, yes, they have controlled me a bit because I'm now in solitude and confinement. You understand? I don't get out to talk to people.
I know that feeling. It's I guess, yeah, so where we're at is we're doing the best we can, and you've certainly done a wonderful job of just at least getting people to question this thing. But everyone seems to be very aware that we're not out of the woods yet, that there can be, in essence, more false flags that are designed for an agenda, whether it's to disarm, whether it's to create power or control over the population. And so we've got to keep vigilant, keep our eyes open.
Very. That's all you can hope for. Get the people to understand that our governments are not here to look after us. They're here to look after somebody else. We're only the sheep.
And we've got to just keep asking questions and basically hold our governments to account and not let them get away with just blindly using the media to just
What was the name of that former Liberal minister who started the Democrat Party? Yes. What was his name? To keep the bastards honest.
Keep the bastards honest.
That's what we
somehow we've
have
failed.
to No, but we're trying.
We are. Look, I want to thank you, Andrew, for all your support, for coming forward. And, you're still here, so I'm going to be carrying the baton for quite a while with the Wasp Files. And hopefully I'll reach some more understandings that can give you some resolution as well.
You're reaching a far better audience than what I ever could. And that, for me, that is excellent. A couple of little things, I might disagree with this, but it's purely, it's nothing really. The main thing is to get the story out and let people know exactly who and what is going on in Australia.
Well, that's what we're here for. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up there, Andrew. I want to thank you again.
And please keep the bastards honest.
Well, I'm trying the best I can. All righty.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wasp Files. New episodes will be uploaded every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Feel free to share far and wide, and please see the links to the Dropbox files and information relating to the episodes. Also, without any obligation, please see the Buy Me a Coffee campaign, which helps keep the channel running and also provides profits to my friends who are survivors from Port Arthur who have supported me on this journey. Thank you.